One thing I've learned from teaching for many years is there is no perfect position at the top. Today I want to focus on the lead arm. For me as a right-hander, my left arm position at the top. So where should the left arm be at the top of the golf swing? So I'll hit one shot here. Okay, now if we take a look at that on videotape from down the target line, I'm going to look at the angle of the left arm and where it should be. Now there's some really interesting ways that people have tried to do this. And some people think there is a perfect position at the top. And you know, as a teacher, that's the easiest thing in the world to teach. You teach everybody the same thing, day in and day out. But when you look at the best players in the world on the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour, you see variance in where this lead arm is at the top of my backswing. One thing that I've looked at is the angle of the shaft at address. And the idea of having my left arm parallel to that original shaft plane line. And that's really a cool thing. It kind of lines up all these parallel lines and it looks like, man, that's going to be a great place. But we also have to look at the depth of the lead arm. How far back does it get behind you? What does that do? Obviously, it relates to how much you turn your hips and turn your shoulders, of how much depth you get. But there are a lot of players that take the club really high. So in my teaching, I've used corridors or parameters, corridors of success. That if you're within these areas, then you're going to be probably in fine shape. You'll be able to hit great shots. Now, the lead arm can be pretty low with some really great players. Matt Kuchar would be one player who has his left arm really low. And in the golf machine, for a lot of teachers, which was a well-known way of teaching, especially out on the West Coast, the left arm should be parallel to the shoulders, to the shoulder plane. And that's a really cool idea too. But again, when you look at these great players, if you look at Colin Morikawa or Dustin Johnson or Matt Kuchar, you know, you see all these variants of where this left arm can be. And then I'm also looking to the left wrist. For me as a right-hander, my left wrist, is it parallel to my forearm to this left arm at the top? Or does it have a little cup? Is it bowed? And then you have these matchups to look at. So there's a lot of things that a teacher needs to know to look at where should this left arm be at the top. We're going to take a good look at it. When my left arm is lower, it's pretty easy to have this a little flatter, and then when the arm goes up, it's a little tougher to have it flatter. But guess what? Guys do it. From Arnold Palmer to Tom Weiskopf, Tom Watson, to the modern players who have the left arm really high and bow the wrist. But there's Freddie Couples and others that go up and have a pretty high left arm and go this way. So we're going to focus on left arm position at the top and where it should be and how you can study it yourself to see if I'm in this nice corridor of success. I'm going to move over right now. Okay, I've got two video clips. I shot one just now with myself, and there's one on the right with Colin Morikawa. I'm going to show you how I've done this for many, many decades of using video to look at these corridors of success. Now to explain this corridor, I'm going to start with my swing over here. The white line goes right up over the shoulders. And that's I call it the Hogan Plane because that's the plane that Hogan used in his great book, 5 Lessons. And he wanted you to swing underneath that, to stay underneath the pane of glass, the famous pane of glass. Now the blue line on the bottom is the shaft plane line at address. So I draw a line up this line. You can see where it's 53 degrees. Here it's set up. And this top line's at 67. So this leaves this big, huge corridor where my lead arm can reside somewhere in here when I'm teaching. So that's kind of what I'm looking at with everybody as a starting point. Now, Colin Morikawa over on the right is hitting a different club. He's got a shorter iron. He holds his hands a little lower. Everybody's a little bit different. I drew the line up over resting on his shoulders. You can see it went to 69 degrees, and this is at 67. So we'll wheel these up to the top, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as we go to the top. These are synced up according to impact. But when we get to the top, you can see that Morikawa's got his left arm a little bit lower than mine, but above his shoulder plane. I've got my arm, my shoulders look like they're slightly steeper. Let's just focus on the left arm, and it just barely stayed under this pane of glass. I took this a little further back. That's a 6-iron I'm hitting, and Colin looks like he's hitting a 9-iron. But you can see he bows his wrist to the top. He starts with a weak grip, and then bows that wrist. But look where the left arm is. So we're looking to see where this guy is. Now, what Hogan wanted to make sure that you stayed underneath the pane of glass. That's the white line coming down to the center of the golf ball. Of course, it's very important where you draw the line from. So Hogan mentioned the center of the golf ball, so that's how I draw it. You can see on both pictures right here. There's a lot of other things that I look at here. The amount of rotation in the hips. Looks like I turn my hips a little bit more, what the knees look like. But again, when I'm looking at this left arm, the left arm position, I could draw a line on my left arm, and you can see my left arm is a little bit bent at the top, more so than Colin's. I'll draw with a yellow line, and it's not perfect. I'm going to just draw from the center up to my arm, and we'll get a number on there. Let me push the other button, and we'll go right straight up that line. And that gives you my arm plane at the top is at about 56, started at 53, and Colin has got his left arm at about that position at about 51, and he started at 51 here. So that was the matchup I mentioned earlier on in this video clip, that for a lot of players, this left arm matches the original shaft plane. So it just gives you these parallel lines out here. I'll draw some more lines out here so you can kind of see. I'll get this one to 51 and 51 out here. And it's got that beautiful symmetry to it. And we'll just watch. I'll let Colin come back a little more here. And then as he swings, you'll start to see some matchups of these lines as we go through. He's coming out pretty close right there, and I'm coming out pretty close right here. So, more of a circular motion, or these parallel lines in space. So that's a pretty cool way to look at it. Anyway, the left arm, man, it's so important. I don't like to see you get over top of the Hogan Plane line. It could be a little bit lower, could be a little bit higher. That's a pretty big success corridor that I've got in there for you. Most guys come pretty close to that top line, just underneath it. I think that's a great place for it to be. And then in some later videos, we'll definitely talk about all of these other things you can look at as you examine someone's golf swing, for the shoulder plane, amount of hip turn, what the legs are doing, what the rotations look like from down the target line, going to your finish position. Just a lot of great stuff to look at. But that's been a big part of my teaching, is to look at what are the great players doing, what are the similarities. At the top of the backswing, their similarities are wide. Some guys are high with the left arm, some are very low with the left arm, but it should be within a range. And for me in teaching, as I've taught the 8-step swing, positions, looking at positions, there are safety zones, corridors. I'm not teaching one way of swinging. The easiest thing to repeat is to teach everybody a perfect swing. But when we look at the best players in the world, we see that that absolutely is not true. There are all kinds of different backswings that hit the greatest shots in the world. The greatest players have different backswings. If you look at all the guys on the Ryder Cup team, they're all different. Some will be more upright, some will be more flat. This is one way that I look to see that my students, my general students, are in good position at the top of the backswing.